What's going on, guys, and welcome back. Today I thought I would share my Final Fantasy collection with you and just talk Final Fantasy. Okay, let's take a look at some of the collection that I do have here, and then I'll talk about Final Fantasy. So I got 13. We'll get into this one later on. And Lightning Returns. I don't know if this is any good. Haven't played it, but here it is anyways. Crystal Chronicles for the GameCube. Echoes of Time for the Wii. And then back here we have Final Fantasy 12, which was alright. Then we got Final Fantasy 10 on the PS2, 10-2. Back there's 10 and 10-2 on the PS4, which really looks pretty good. Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy Origins, which come with the first and second part. And there's Tactics, which I needed to ask a friend of mine how to show me how to play Tactics, because I don't know. I've always wanted to play this game. I don't know, like turn-based games like this. I don't know how to play them, but that's going to show me. Back there, Final Fantasy Chronicles, which is pretty neat because it has Final Fantasy 4 and Chrono Trigger. Of course, Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy Anthology, which is 5 and 6, and we got Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy Revenant Wings, right there. There's Heaven's Ward, A Realm Reborn, and then Final Fantasy 4, the complete collection. Back there, hidden behind Final Fantasy 4 is Final Fantasy 15. And way back there in the back, if you can see it, there's the box for Final Fantasy 11 Online. And up there is Final Fantasy 11 for the Xbox 360. And then, of course, there's Typo and cars passing by. Always has to be cars passing by when I'm shooting. And then Crisis Core. And then right there we got Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on the PSP. And right there is Dissidia. How I got into this series is pretty interesting. I was young. I don't remember how old I was, but I remember my grandmother taking me to our local video rental store, and I ended up renting Final Fantasy Mystic Quest for the Super NES. And I brought it home and I played it. And actually, that was the first Final Fantasy game that I had ever played. I hadn't played Final Fantasy 1 or 2 on the NES. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know they existed. So this was actually my first Final Fantasy game I had ever played. And I thought it was good. I liked the game. A lot of people don't like Mystic Quest because they say it's a simple game. And it is. It is simple. I don't own it. I need to get it. But I liked it. I played it that weekend. I didn't finish it, of course, but I played it that weekend. And then I returned it. And I never rented it again. I think it was like, I want to say maybe a couple weeks later, I went back to the rental store and I got Final Fantasy 3, which is Final Fantasy 6 in Japan. And that's when I fell in love with Final Fantasy. I absolutely fell in love with that game. I loved it. I had it for the weekend. I returned it. And again, I never finished it. And I don't own it. But I do. I'll explain that here in a second. But that's what really got me into Final Fantasy. Now, like I said, it was later on when I started playing, or when I played Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on the original NES. And another couple of titles that I don't own, but I do, and I'll again explain that here in a second. But I think it was like 10 years ago I told myself that I was going to try and collect all the North American Final Fantasy titles to have a complete collection, and I just didn't do it. I didn't do it. I don't know why. As bad as I wanted them, I didn't do it. I do own 30 titles in the collection, and out of those 30, whoa, the wind's picking up. Out of those 30, I've only finished 4. And there's a good reason for that. But first of all, let me show you what I was talking about when I said that I own Final Fantasy 3, which is Final Fantasy 6. I have it here on the Final Fantasy Anthology on the original PlayStation. I did try playing through it last year. I couldn't do it. And I do own Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2 on the PSP. And again, I tried playing through them and I just couldn't do it. And here's the reason why. Because I believe I'm one of those people that I want to play the original games on the original hardware that they were made for. So when I started playing Final Fantasy VI, it just wasn't the same for me. I wanted to play it on the Super Nintendo like it was meant to be, which was Final Fantasy III. I know it's a little confusing, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, and then Final Fantasy 1 and 2. I was playing on the PSP, which is awesome. You know, I could take them with me wherever I go. Like if I go to like a disc golf tournament, I could take Final Fantasy 1 and 2 with me. But to be here at home, I don't want to sit in front of, you know, a PSP and enjoy those games. I want to play them on an old CRT TV, on the on the NES and the SNES. And it just like, it wasn't the same for me when I was playing Final Fantasy VI on the PlayStation, because I don't know, there was just something about it. I love the original graphics of the SNES and the sound, which this does have the graphics of the sound, but it's, you know what I'm saying, it's just not the same. And also, I do own Final Fantasy 1 and 2. Damn. We're actually expecting some rain, so I do own Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on the PlayStation. But again, I don't know, I'm one of those people that want to play on original hardware that the game was made for, which was the NES. And I don't own those titles. I do want to get them, and maybe, you know, eventually I will. But the game that I did actually finish was until like years later, after I had played Final Fantasy 3, which is Final Fantasy 7. My mom got me that game when it first came out, and I remember that game being like $100. I was like, whoa, that's the most expensive game I ever seen, you know, like video game ever back then. And I got it, and I played through it. I actually played to the very end, and I fell in love with that game. I love that game. The next game I got after that was Final Fantasy VIII. A lot of people don't like that game. It's a little different, you know. It's way different coming from like Final. Well, I thought Final Fantasy VII was different, you know, with like it was more modernized, and then you go to Final Fantasy VIII, and it's a little even more modernized, I guess. Or you want to take a step back? I don't know, but I did play through half of Final Fantasy VIII, and I stopped playing because I felt like it was becoming a chore. I was playing this game every day. It wasn't as fun to me as playing through Final Fantasy VII. I liked the game. Don't get me wrong. I did like the game. But then, I don't know, just something about it just felt like it was becoming more of like a chore. I just wanted to get through the game, and I wasn't having fun anymore. So I stopped playing it. I started playing something else. And I never went back to it. So, if I do ever want to play through Final Fantasy VIII again, I'd have to start from the beginning, because I'm pretty sure I don't have my save anymore, and even if I did, I don't know where I'm going. I'd be lost in the game. But what they need to do is what they're doing, what I'm waiting for, is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now that's a game that I am going to play through all the way from the start to the end. But where is it? I've been waiting like, what, 2 years? We've been waiting 2 years for this game, and it still hasn't come out yet. Other game that I did finish was Final Fantasy X on the PS2. This was a fun game. I actually really enjoyed this game. And what made it even cooler was I wasn't playing this alone. I mean, I played through a lot of it alone, but a lot of the time my brother was there to help me out, and we played through this game together, and we finished it together. So that's what made this Final Fantasy like a game I'll never forget. It was me and my brother. We played it together. We finished it together, and I actually picked up Final Fantasy X and X-2 on. There were the HD versions on PS4, and they look beautiful. I started playing Final Fantasy X again, but I didn't want to go through it all over again because it took a little bit of time, and that's the thing. This is why those were the only 4 titles. Well, actually, I say 4, but I only talked about 2 that I finished. Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm, I guess that's what they call it. Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm. It's a hard word to say, but Theater Rhythm Curtain Call on the 3DS. I actually completed these also because these were fun rhythm games that I laid in bed and played the shit out of, and I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed these games so much. It's just too bad they don't make more of these. I would like to have a 3rd one, but I mean, Curtain Call, so that must be the end. So I really did enjoy these games. I haven't finished or haven't even played Final Fantasy X-2 yet, but I did pick up Final Fantasy 12, and I did start playing it, and it felt a little overwhelming because the game was so big, and the menu system was, was getting a little bit complicated. And I thought, man, these games are just getting harder and harder. Like, they're getting more complicated, especially like the menu system. They kept throwing me off. I'm used to that easy stuff. You start getting to games like Final Fantasy 12, and it starts changing up a bit. I haven't forgot Final Fantasy 10. Or no, I'm sorry. This is 10 or 9. I suck at Roman numerals, but this was another game that I did start playing on the PlayStation, and I was enjoying, but I stopped. And again, the reason why I don't play through a lot of these games is you have to put time into playing a Final Fantasy game. This isn't one of those games you can pick up and complete in a weekend. I mean, maybe for some people they can. I can't. Because to play through like a Final Fantasy game, you're playing through like 80 plus hours just to get to the end. I'll get through half of the game, and then if I'm not having fun, it just feels like I'm doing a chore, and I don't like that feeling when I'm playing a video game. When I'm playing a video game, I want to feel like I'm having fun and I'm enjoying the game and I want to get through it. But once it gets that long, it just feels like a chore to get through it, and I'm not enjoying the game anymore. I don't want to play it anymore, so I put it down, and that's just the way it is with me. I like a game that I can pick up and try to finish during the weekend. But I have a couple of Final Fantasy games here that are still sealed, and I'll tell you why right now. Now, my favorite game series went online. I do own Final Fantasy XI for the PS2. I also own it on the 360, and I also own it on the PC. And I played a little bit of it, but I couldn't get into the online gaming of Final Fantasy. It was a lot harder. A way lot harder. That I wasn't having fun with it. I couldn't get into it. And the 2 games that I do have sealed are A Realm Reborn and Heaven's Ward. The reason why also I couldn't get into these games too much is the fact that I don't know how it is now, but back then you did have to pay $14 a month or $20 a month, something like that, just to play online on these games. On top of me already paying $60 a year to be able to play games online, not to pay $14 a month to play games online. I didn't want to do it. And as difficult as these games are, I thought I would just buy them just to have them in my collection. And that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. I'm just buying these games, these Final Fantasy games, just to add to my collection, because I do eventually want to have a complete North American collection. But here's a good one. Here's a good one that I thought that was gonna bring me back into the series, and it's Final Fantasy 13. Man, was I wrong. I was totally wrong. I think my brother got me this game one year for Christmas, and I started playing it. I was like, man, I'm not getting anywhere on this game. What the hell's going on here? Actually got Lightning Returns. I don't have 13.2, but I do have Lightning Returns. I haven't played it yet, but I was like, what the hell's going on? Why am I not getting anywhere? It was later on that I discovered you have to actually play 20 hours into the game before the game starts getting any good. Needless to say, I played this game for 2 hours and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I was like, what's going on with my Final Fantasy games? I love these games so much. What are they doing? Like, what the hell happened? Why are they going in this direction? I don't know, but I haven't played Lightning Returns yet. Hopefully it's a better game. I will try it, but I don't know. Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy killer for me. Seriously, it really was a Final Fantasy killer for me. I was like, no. It kind of didn't ruin the series, but I was like, no, not gonna do it. I'm done. I'm not gonna do it anymore. And then 2 years ago, I got Final Fantasy 15 for Christmas, and I started playing it, and I was enjoying it. I was like, finally, here's a game that I can finally enjoy. That I play through it? Nope, I didn't do it. And it bothers me that I didn't do it, because as much as I love the series, I couldn't put that much time into playing a single video game, and it sucks. But maybe, one of these days I'll go back and revisit it. Now that I'm here in this new game room, I don't know. I just feel like instead of spending all that time playing one game, there's so many other games I can be enjoying. All in all, I love the Final Fantasy series. I'm still going to continue to collect for it. Whether I play the game or not, it still has a soft spot in my heart, and I'm going to continue buying them, and I'm going to continue enjoying them, whether they're getting played or whether they're on my shelf. I don't care. I'll always love the Final Fantasy series, even if one ruined it. Doesn't mean the whole series is ruined. There's some great Final Fantasy games out there, and I'm going to continue to get them. Hopefully continue to play them. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.